Water bath canning is probably the easier process to do. Pressure canning, which must be done for plain vegetables and meat products and some tomato products, can be a little scary for some people because of the use of a pressure canner. So following along with somebody that knows how to do it can really help.
Kansas gardeners are smack dab in the middle of canning season, which typically runs from June through October, with some carryover into the Christmas season. Harvesting garden produce at peak freshness and canning them as soon as possible, ideally that day or the next, provides the best quality. On today's Sound Living, food preservation for summer produce. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension Food Safety Specialist Karen Blakeslee, coordinator of the university's Rapid Response Center, says the keys to canning are using quality produce and following a recipe that's been researched and tested. Karen, when it comes to canning safely and properly, what are some of the things that we really need to keep in mind?
Well, first of all, it really is important to start with a good recipe that has the research backing behind it to know that that recipe, when followed correctly, will produce a safe product, and following the right procedures. So the foundation is that recipe and knowing how to use the canners properly. So it takes some research, it takes some homework, read up on how the canner works, read the instruction manual for that particular canner, and then make sure that you're using really good recipes that give you good guidance on how to safely can the foods.
And there are two types of canners that we can use for high-acid foods?
Yes, there is the traditional water bath canner, which is essentially a large stock pot with a lid, and then it has a rack in it, and that rack is important. It helps stabilize the jars so they don't wobble around in the water, but it also helps the water circulate around the entire jar and keeps them off the bottom of the canner. You don't want to sit the jars directly on the bottom because you could possibly crack the jars during the processing. So that is definitely used for high-acid foods, which includes jams and jellies, pickles, many tomato products, fruits. So those are the types of foods that you can can in a water bath canner. An alternative to that is called an atmospheric steam canner. And this is usually a little bit smaller than your typical water bath canner, and you don't use as much water. And it creates a steamy environment inside the canner itself without pressure. So this can be used for high-acid foods, again, such as those I just mentioned, but it can only be used for those that have a total processing time of 45 minutes or less, because you'll probably run out of water. It's just a small amount of water that's used in those. It is a little easier, as far as handling, a hot pot of water, and if you're just doing small batch canning, that might be appropriate for you.
So that might be something that maybe some first-time users might want to try?
Yeah, and it's less expensive. Again, read the instruction booklet on how it should be used. But again, it's just for those types of foods that have a total processing time of 45 minutes or less. And that includes adjusting for your altitude, adjusting that processing time. So it would work well for something like jams and jellies, again, pickles. Some fruits, depending on the kind of fruit, could work for some tomato-type products. So you just have to pick and choose on that.
That's kind of the first step. Then we also have to figure out how we're going to get it into the jars and onto the shelves.
Yeah, and so you got to have some equipment to do this process. Having good, clean jars that are in good condition, don't have any chips or cracks or scratches. Jars can be reused from year to year. Just take good care of them. You need the two-piece lids, some people call them flats, and then the rings to screw the lid onto the jar. The lids need to be new. You can only use them once. Do not reuse those lids because they will likely not seal correctly again. The rings can be reused as long as they're in good condition. Over time, they probably will get rusty. And if they get to that point, then it's time to recycle them or repurpose them for another use. One trick on the canning rings, the screw bands, don't put them in your dishwasher. The dishwasher will rust them faster than wash them by hand. So take good care of them, and they'll last a good while.
The flats have kind of a gummy thing around the edge?
Yeah, it has a sealing compound. And the lids that you buy today do not need to be preheated. This is per the manufacturer's directions. The sealing compound will heat up enough during the processing to seal the product. So the primary thing is to wash and dry. Wash the lids in soapy water and dry them first, and then just use them as is. If you do choose to heat up the lids, which you can, the primary thing is to not boil them. You only need to put them in a pan of hot water. If you boil them, that sealing compound will get too soft and will likely not seal correctly. So again, they recommend that you don't have to do that, and it can save you a little bit of a time and one extra step.
Do we need to leave any space in the jars, or should they be filled to the brim?
Yeah, that space at the top of the jar is called headspace, and that is important because that's going to affect how well the jar seals and pulls a vacuum. It varies by the type of product that you're canning, and so good recipes will tell you how much headspace you need. In general, jams and jelly type products are 1/4 of an inch. Pickles, most tomato products, fruits, those are at 1/2 an inch. Low acid foods such as plain vegetables like green beans, corn, carrots, those need a 1-inch headspace. And the same is true for most meat products. That's kind of the rule of thumb. But again, using good recipes, it will tell you what headspace you really need.
I didn't mention it at the beginning, but really the other thing we want to make sure we're doing is that we're canning during the harvest, making sure that these are at their freshest.
Yeah, exactly. Really, if you can can food the day it's picked, that is ideal because the fresher the better. I tell people if you start with good food, that's going to increase your chances of good food in the end. If you start with bad food, it's probably going to still be bad food. This whole canning process really does not improve things. So it really is important to get your food preserved at its peak.
If you are someone who maybe planted a garden for the first time and want to attempt the canning process, is this something that may be better done with someone who has some experience?
I think that's a great idea, and it just eases some of the anxiety of doing this. You know, water bath canning is probably the easier process to do. Pressure canning, which must be done for plain vegetables and meat products and some tomato products, can be a little scary for some people because of the use of a pressure canner. So following along with somebody that knows how to do it can really help. I also have some instructional videos on my website to help you learn how to do the different types of methods. It's not so much about the product that I'm canning in those videos, it's more about the process that you go through, the steps in doing this.
Well, and I like the fact that you have made these videos because, as we know with today's social media and YouTube and all the other avenues for finding out information, not all of that is legitimate or correct.
Exactly. Anybody can put anything out there these days, and knowing what resources and educational material to follow is really important. And so that's why we try to do what we can to get instructions and education out about safe home food preservation. And it is something that seems to have picked up quite a bit. I just heard here within the last day or so that one of the pressure canner manufacturers has run out of canner. They've sold them all. So it's become quite popular, and, with more people at home, they're wanting to try this. So I think it's great, but let's start on the right foot so that we make a good, safe product in the end.
Well, and along those same lines, we also have to make sure that we're not only canning this, but we're also using it so it doesn't go to waste, because this does not last forever.
No, it does not last forever. We recommend that you use these foods within 1 year for best safety and for best quality, because over time during storage, depending on where you store these foods, things can change. If a lid pops open for some unknown reason, please do not taste it. You do not know what's going on there. We don't want you to even stick your pinky finger in it to see if it tastes okay, because that little dip could really make you sick. So be smart about that. In fact, I just heard from somebody the other day that found some home canned foods from the early 90s. That's really old, and that really should be thrown away. While it might still look good, you really run a risk with it being that old.
Where would be the best place to store the preserve?
It's best in a cool, dry, dark location, away from your furnace, away from your clothes dryer and washer, not out in the garage where extreme heat and extreme cold conditions can occur. So somewhere where it's cool, dry, and dark, because fluctuations in those three conditions can really shorten the shelf life of canned foods. Same is true for commercially canned foods, too.
And I want to emphasize the fact that we don't want to be altering these recipes. If you're following the recipe, follow the recipe.
Exactly. Those recipes are tested for best safety, and that will give you the safest and best results. If you tweak one ingredient or add something because you like that better and then go ahead and can it, you've changed that recipe, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be a safe product in the end. You can add those things after the canning, after it's been canned and you're ready to use it, then add those extra special ingredients to make that product fit your taste.
How long does the canning season really run?
We're right in the middle of it right now. It's usually around June to October or so, but it also picks back up during the holidays because people like to give gifts for Christmas. So it's usually like jams and jellies during that time of year. But this is really the prime canning season right now, between first part of June to October or so.
So calibrating and storing your can are important as well.
Absolutely. The pressure canners have a little more maintenance to them. Depending on the type of canner that you have, there's the weighted gauge canner and there's a dial gauge canner. The dial gauges need to be checked every year to make sure that they're accurate and reading properly. And local extension offices, most of them have the testing equipment to help you with that. We can test some brands of canners, so contact your local extension office for that. But also, if your canner has gaskets, you want to make sure that they're pliable and not cracked and dry. Make sure that the vent tube is clear, doesn't have any food debris stuck in it, because that can prevent how well the pressure builds and holds inside the pressure canner. Take good care of these canners, and they will really last quite a long time. The other trick that I tell people, we have a lot of problems with hard water, and an easy way to keep your canner clean is to add 2 or 3 tablespoons of vinegar into the canner water, and that will clean the inside walls of the canner, but also during processing, it'll keep your jars clean too. So it's a neat little trick, and it works really well, and it's an easy way to help maintain your pressure canners, and you can do that in water bath canners too.
You mentioned that Extension has a number of publications. You have some videos out as well. How can they find all of that information?
Yes, I have a website. It's my Rapid Response Center website, which is www.rrc.ksu.edu, and you'll see in the left column a link to the food preservation section.
That's K-State Research and Extension Food Safety Specialist Karen Blakeslee, coordinator of the university's Rapid Response Center. Again, to learn more, go to www.rrc.ksu.edu or contact your local county or district extension office. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.